Welcome back to Velvet Bite Radio. Get ready to travel back in time with Dr. Dean Bertram as he recounts his travels through Romania in the 1980s.
Welcome, everybody, to Velvet Bite Radio. We have a great show for you tonight. First announcements, we have Substack, quite a few new subscribers and a paid subscriber on Substack. So I'm just letting you guys know there's a loyalty rewards page for subscribers that has a whole archive of videos, PDF, magazines, folklore stuff, occult stuff, vampire stuff, history stuff. There's 2 different archives available. So if you go to melissadawnharris.substack.com, you can become a free subscriber, of course, and then you get access to a lot of the free articles and the free podcast and free daily posts and stuff like that. And if you're a paid subscriber, you get not only all the free stuff, you get the podcast that we're going to be doing for exclusive members, you get the archive, and all articles go into the archive after about 4 months. So you get access to that and group chat, private chat, all that stuff. So go to the Loyalty Rewards Club, go to melissadawnharris.substack.com, join up, sign up, support the show. And of course, I know things get a little tight. We're in a little bit of a tight economy, so you can support by many other ways. You can support by subscribing on that Substack for free, interacting, putting comments on the show. You can right now, if you're streaming in, click a thumbs up on this show, share it, save it, bookmark it, leave commentary after if you come back. Those are different ways. Share it on your social media. Those are just ways you can help build. And like I said, follow and subscribe on the Substack for free if you can't afford to pay for it. There is stuff for you. Every little bit helps. I think I'm done with that little spiel. It was super exciting because I'm going to be doing some free podcasts. I've been playing around with Substack, so it's a great place. And I'm starting to slowly build, so I would appreciate you guys helping me out and showing up there because between YouTube and Substack, those are going to be my main hubs. Now, tonight on Velvet Bite Radio, guys, we are going to journey beyond the pages of Bram Stoker's Dracula and into the real reality of the shadowed heart of Romania. And my guest is Dr. Dean Bertram, and he traveled through the country of Romania in the 1980s, kind of retracing the path of Jonathan Harker almost. Tourism under a communist regime. A very different Romania than you would find today, through misplaced valleys, villages from old. So we're going to explore it, what it meant to walk through that land, shaped by legends, the politics, did it match his Gothic imagination, and how the line between fictionality, I just made up my own word, can blur when you follow the vampire's trail. Let's bring Dean in. Welcome to the show, Dean. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me here, Melissa. It's always fun to talk to you.
Yes, absolutely. Now, my biggest question for you, I know you as someone who does a lot of things about UFOs, so I was really surprised when you start saying that you had gone to Romania and kind of on this sort of vampire adventure. When did you first start focusing? Why the vampire? What was its appeal to you, and why did you want to do this?
Well, it was my first international trip as a quasi-adult. I just finished high school, and I took, I guess what in the US they'd call a gap year. So instead of doing the sensible thing and going to college, I bummed around for a year, and some of that bumming around included traveling to Europe and to America. The year was 1989, and while I would love to say it was just a Dracula trip, it was. That's the only reason I was in Romania. The whole trip was me kind of again, as a quasi-adult, really still a teenager, but dipping my toes into the things that had always fascinated me in pop culture. So, for example, when I was in London, I had to go and see 221B Baker Street, and there's a bar there that has an actual, so you can go to the genuine 221B Baker Street where Sherlock Holmes was meant to reside. I think it was an insurance office or a bank or something then. But you could go there, and I think they had some knickknacks to give away. And then not too far away, there was a bar in London which had a complete reconstruction of Sherlock Holmes' sitting room in 221B Baker Street, which was a lot of fun. And so that was one part of what I wanted to do. I was a massive James Bond fan of the books as well as the movies, but particularly the books. So I think I'd read by that stage in my life every Bond book. And so I would find the bars that Bond drank at when I was in Europe and order the same drink that he drank in that bar. So Bond didn't always drink, despite the movies, martini, shaken not stirred or whatever it is. Bond drank all kinds of drinks and cocktails. He was a sophisticated Englishman, right? So I'd go, what was the drink he drank in this bar in Paris? Or what was the drink that he drank here? And, wherever. And I would drink whenever I could. I'd hit a Bond bar, and they were often classic bars, and they'd drink the drink he drunk there. I wanted to go to Reichenbach Falls, where Sherlock Holmes originally died before he was decided that they decided he was too popular a character to kill.
So
Where
he died in Romania?
No. This is
Or
just
no,
when I was
or
in
this
Europe.
is
Generally,
this is your European thing. You were going to all
my
these
general
locations
fanboy,
around Europe, not Romania. I gotcha.
my general fanboy trip. So that was in Switzerland at the Reichenbach Falls, where he supposedly tumbled over the falls with his arch nemesis, Professor Moriarty, at the end of the first run of the Sherlock Holmes stories, which are being collected as the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. They first ran in the Strand magazine, but the Strand magazine readers were so upset in why they wanted more Holmes that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle brought Holmes back essentially from the dead, and he kind of just set it up so he hadn't really died. And then it became the return of Sherlock Holmes of the next lot of stories. But anyway, so I wanted to go to the Reichenbach Falls where Holmes had died. And several things like this. That was, much of my trip. I was also traveling with my friend at the time who had no interest in my kind of pop culture nerdom, but he had an interest in automotive racing. So for him, we'd always be going to where, famous automotive, drivers lived in Europe or where racetracks were. So it was this very weird shared trip where we would be, hitting the different things which appealed to both of us. But obviously, I was a massive fan of all things horror, and I was a big fan of Bram Stoker's novel, as well, of course, of all the various Dracula movies from pretty much Nosferatu onwards. And so I wanted to go to Romania to go to the original Dracula's castle, because I'd read, in fact, I bought this just for the show because I don't have my original. I think it was probably a first or second edition. It was a hardcover I used to have, but the book In Search of Dracula, and they had a companion documentary, which
is that Raymond McNally?
Yeah, it's Raymond McNally and Radu Florescu, who's the Romanian scholar who did it with McNally. And there's the wonderful documentary which accompanied it, with Christopher Lee actually narrating the whole movie and also playing Dracula throughout.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It's on my channel, guys. I have a section where my favorite vampire documentaries, that's listed in there if you want to check it out.
People should watch it. It's amazing. And the book's amazing as well. So I'd read the book, and I was like, at the time, and you see documentaries even in the 90s, like after I was there's a Jonathan Ross documentary also called In Search of Dracula. Jonathan Ross was kind of this interesting English journalist who did a lot of pop cultural programming. I think he had something called The Incredibly Strange Film Show I used to adore, but he also did his own In Search of Dracula. And when they went to Dracula Castle in that movie, they went to what at the time was, or in that documentary, they went to what at the time was kind of sold as the real Dracula castle, which it isn't. But there's a castle called Bran Castle in Romania, which kind of still stayed from the period. I mean, it's still a full, solid, functional, castle, and it's a gorgeous castle. It's actually, I think, more Germanic in its origins, because Romania had all kinds of different, national and racial groups within it. But it was always the castle that was kind of, used to be the push for tourists to go to. But in the McNally and Florescu book, they said while Dracula once visited there or stayed there, it was not his castle. Like, that was not the castle. The castle that he actually built, or in fact rebuilt, and we can get to that part of the story, was actually in a different part of Romania. It's kind of on the southern, I guess, side of Transylvania, and it's Bucharest, the capital, is almost at the base of Romania, at the very southern end, and it's it's a number of hours from Bucharest. And so, because I had the McNally and Florescu book, I knew where it was, because they have a big part of the book which talks about where Castle Dracula actually is. And just to contextualize it now for people, if you want to go to the actual real Castle Dracula that I'm talking about now, I haven't been back since 1989, and that was when this was the end of the Cold War, and we can get to that in a minute. But there was no tourist stuff there at all. Now you can actually go there, and there's Dracula camping areas and Dracula hotels, and it's very accessible. Back then, there were just little villages and communist kind of buildings in the village, and there was no. It was very hard to even get there. It wasn't like it is today.
Yeah,
it was very different.
Is that? I think the one you're talking about is the Ponari Citadel. Is that it? Yeah,
that's correct.
It's a lot different, and it's built up into the mountainside. Like, it's really interesting.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, it's quite a lot different from that Bran castle.
It's entirely different, and now it's been rebuilt to a degree. I think they kind of did some even back then. I think the government had done some reconstruction, but it was not a tourist place. Like when we were there. And I can get to this part as well. It was hard to even, nobody spoke English like at all. Maybe in Bucharest, a few hustlers who tried to get you to change American greenback for their currency, which was super illegal. But you'd always get approached by these hustler types in the street wanting, American dollar. And going in there, we'd been warned not to do that anyway. But the point is, nobody in Romania spoke English. If anybody spoke English to you, they were either a huckster or they were a member of the secret, police. And I encountered both while I was there. But normal Romanians, there was no. Certainly, when you went out to rural Romania, like literally BFE Romania, right? Nobody spoke English. I mean, hardly a word of English. So it was like when you're in most places in Europe, even where they pretend they don't understand, like sometimes Parisians kind of don't, are kind of conceited, or they used to be back in the day, and they pretend they had difficulty understanding you. But normally in Europe, you can get by even if you don't fully know the languages. Many Europeans are multilingual, and they're not somebody, 3 people over is. But this was different. In rural Romania at the time, nobody spoke English. I put it this way: I didn't encounter anybody who spoke it when I was out there looking at the castle.
I have my father was from Eastern Europe, the Croatian area of the Yugoslavia, what was Yugoslavia at the time, and my friend, her father was from, I think it's Macedonia or something like that now they call it. But she went back. She went back in the early 80s when she was little, and she was like, I felt like I was going back to pioneer days. Like, it was crazy. She's like, totally not like beyond communist. Like, she's like, it was scary, and they still did all their traditional stuff. Very similar, not exactly the same, but a similar culture to Romania. But she was like, it was like farming, outhouses, no plumbing, no proper electricity. And she's like, I was so little, I was so confused. So yeah.
We went in through Hungary. So we stayed in Hungary for a couple of days, and Hungary had really liberalized. This was 89. So a lot of Eastern Europe was either liberalizing or was on the cusp of collapse. Romania was one of the last countries that hadn't started to liberalize. Ceausescu was literally probably the last. I think Albania had a hardcore tyrant dictator still as well, but Ceausescu was maybe the last arguably great, if you can use the word great, almost a Dracula himself in his cruelty and his tyranny. And so going from Hungary, where you could buy like bootleg cassettes from street vendors of like the Pet Shop Boys and whatever the big bands were at the time, and it felt very liberal. It didn't feel, it was different to Austria, but it still had a fairly Western. You could tell there was still it was really liberalizing. They had rock music and people were wearing Western type clothes, and you felt very almost like you're in a Western European city, even though you weren't, but it had been liberalized. As soon as you went into Romania, that changed instantly. Interestingly, coming out when I went to Yugoslavia, because for some reason we'd booked, maybe we were going somewhere else on the way out, but while we went through Hungary to get in, we came out through Yugoslavia. This is how nuts it was. Imagine going on an international train journey right today, going between Romania and Yugoslavia. We didn't even know this. The train stops. We're in Romania. End of the line, or we don't even understand what anybody's saying, but they usher everybody off the train. And we're like, what did that? and this is literally the end of the line. We're still in Romania, and everybody's walking with, it's like when the train breaks down in Uncle Buck. Literally, people are carrying big cases between them, and everybody's just walking down this rural road through, I don't know if it was corn or wheat, I can't remember, but it was these big like fields. And we figured out, maybe there was another international person we talked to, we figured out that we had to walk to the next train station across the border into Yugoslavia. Like, it didn't go through.
That's totally Jonathan Harker. He gets booed off one carriage and has to walk to the next.
There
You
you
got
go.
it.
There you go. And I'll tell you, and this is maybe even in some ways more terrifying. When we were walking through these cornfields or wheat fields or whatever they were, which were on either side of the rural road we were walking, just in front of us, casual as all get out, came Romanian. I guess we were still in Romania at that stage. It was some kind of border patrol anyway, in full like camo, a lighter kind of camo, which suited the field more. Walk with their AKs, like just came through in front of us, and just didn't even look at us. Just walked through to the other and went back into the other side of the cornfield on the other side of the road. And then when we got to the border, we had to go through the Yugoslavian. I think Romania, we just got, I can't even remember what happened on the Romanian side. Maybe we'd already cleared when we got on the train. I can't even remember. But when we'll get more communist horror stories back in Romania in a minute before we get to Dracula's Castle if you want. But when we got into Yugoslavia, I remember the big jovial immigration guy, this big fat guy with a big black moustache. He had relatives in Sydney, Australia, and he could speak more English. He's like, "Oh, maybe you'll know my cousin. He lives in the," and I'm like, I'm from, like, there's a lot of people in Sydney, and Yugoslavia was super friendly as well. Like, it wasn't quite like Hungary, but it was closer to Hungary. It wasn't like Romania. Yugoslavia was liberalizing as well. Romania hadn't liberalized at all. It was like Ceausescu was deposed by the end of that year, and I was there probably literally months later.
Shortly, right around there.
Yeah, months later. Yeah. If I'd been there months later, I would have Berlin Wall was that trip. I think when were we there? Late summer, early fall. Like, it wasn't long until everything started changing.
When my friend went, it was like 82.
Yeah, that was much earlier.
To Yugoslavia. So I think there was probably a lot of changes from 82 to 89.
There was. Happened fast at the end. Like, there seemed to be this Soviet bloc, which was very solid, and then there was this gradual liberalization, and then problems at home, and everything just kind of, fell.
That's crazy. So, you go there, but it was the end of the line, and you had to leave and get to the other train. Was that train still traveling in Romania, or did you go into
No, that was in I think we crossed
Right.
again, this is a memory from over, almost, well over a couple of decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we had to physically cross the frontier or the border, like, on foot. Maybe they did that so it was easier to see who was coming in or something. And I've never experienced that I don't know if this was just a one-off or if it was a regular. I have no idea. Again, I was somebody who could barely communicate with anybody there. But I believe the frontier was there. I think we crossed the frontier, and then we talked to the immigration officials there. It was crazy. It was nuts. And just quickly, when we first got to Bucharest, well, I'll rewind a little bit. When we came into, because we did a lot of Eurail traveling, when we came into Romania, I think we fell asleep and we woke up and it was the early morning when we were traveling, and we were traveling then even through what looked like something out of a Dracula novel. The mountains we were traveling through to go to Bucharest, we probably were going through, the Carpathian Alps, or, through the various mountains in Transylvania. It was some of the wildest country I've ever seen. Like, it just looked, the rock faces and the cliffs and the mountainsides, it looked wild. Like, it looked just inhospitable and crazy and like something straight out of a horror movie. So to rewind to when we were coming in, when I woke up that morning and looked out the train window, I was like, yeah, this is it. I'm here. Like, it really felt like, this feels like I'm going into a Dracula novel right now.
It feels like you say, in the novel, that land was considered very mysterious, and he's going farther and farther away from civilization. And you felt like you were saying that, like, it was so far from what even Hungary or Yugoslavia was. And those countries were totally far from civilization compared to New York or London, right?
Yes, the land beyond the forest, right? That's what Transylvania is.
Exactly. So there wasn't a tourist industry set up there. You remind people, like, you're it's not like today.
No.
You're literally left to your own devices.
Except I think they used to watch you. When we came in, I remember we were sitting, I think we were in a car, like a railway car, and we were talking to somebody who was young, a bit older than us. We were 18. He probably was in his early 20s, maybe mid-20s, and he was dressed really slick in a suit. And he spoke very good English. He was Romanian, but he spoke very good English. And I think he was almost definitely, if not secret police, somebody who was a government person, because he was just singing the praises of Romania to us, telling us how wonderful a country it was, and how lucky we were to be here. And I remember me and my friend afterwards going, that guy had to be like some kind of weird representative. And after our experiences of Romania, and it was a shithole of a country then. It was horrible. Like, it was awful. But this guy was singing the praises of how wonderful this country was to us. And it clearly wasn't. So he clearly must have been some, member of the government in some capacity.
Do you think it was a shithole because of the government, or do you think it was just because it was undeveloped? Because I have a sense that before the communist government took place, even though it wasn't as modernized, it might have not been so bad.
Yeah, I think that what happened. Well, I'll give you one example to answer that question. When we went to the market, a market in Bucharest, like a food market in Bucharest, it probably had other things for sale as well. All of the fruit, I'm not kidding you, the fruit was like what you would have thrown it out 3 weeks before in America. It was like literally rotten fruit, and it was being sold. I'm not kidding you. And we were talking to people, and like I said, this is in Bucharest, so some people could still speak a bit of English. It wasn't like when we were out in the boonies, when we went to try to find Castle Dracula, and we were told it all goes east. Like all good food goes east. So it was all being shipped off to what was the Soviet Union, because probably there was lucre involved and who else, but it was unedible. We went to what was meant to be, I think at the time, the best. Sorry, you asked.
No, I was just going to say, so the motherland was taking the best food and leaving them the shit.
Apparently.
That's what England did to Ireland.
It was probably exactly the same. Like, you wouldn't have bought any of the food. We were looking, there was nothing we would buy. There was nothing we would eat. We were from Australia, which is different to America, but people still aren't eating fruit your mother would have thrown out 2 weeks ago or put in the compost 3 weeks ago. You know what I mean? Like, anyway, so we went to a restaurant and this is the capital city, right? And it was the cliche of what a very bad restaurant that wants to look like it's a nice restaurant would be. It was literally waiters in white tuxes, some of them with stains on them, on white, beautiful, big white tablecloths, but stained. And when we asked what we could order, there was one dish. There was nothing you could order. There was one dish. You had the dish.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
And the dish came out, and it was like meat and vegetables, and a fairly standard looking meat vegetable-y kind of dish, and the meat was stone cold. It hadn't even been cooked. They probably just had these plates on a shelf somewhere, right out the back. And we were both pretty hungry. And I just said to my friend, whatever you do, don't eat that meat. Like, just don't eat it. But he ate the meat, and he was really sick. It slowed down our journey, actually. I did not eat the meat. I ate the potatoes, and I maybe picked over some of the other vegetables, but I was not touching that cold meat dish because I had a bad feeling. And sure enough, he got super sick. He was sick for days. And this is in the capital city at one of the best restaurants. That's how bad it was.
Well, I've heard that about, not quite as bad about Cuba, but where there was no consistency in the quality, and you get what you got, and whoever made it, that's how they made it, and it was just whatever meal they had. And I guess it was like that when you would travel to inns and stuff hundreds and hundreds of years ago. You would show up at the inn, and the innkeeper would say, well, here's some potatoes and shit that we have. And that's what you get, but hopefully it wouldn't be rotten and they'd actually cook it.
No, right, exactly. But no, I mean, who knows? It might even have been bad when they cooked it, let alone after it had been. It might have been sitting there cold for 3 days. I got no idea, and that's why I didn't eat the meat. That's one thing I know. You don't eat meat if you're concerned. You can probably eat an old potato, and you're probably not going to die. But if you eat meat, it can be all kinds of troubles. And also, when we got off the train, this is something else worth mentioning, is that, or maybe when we got on the train, I'm trying to remember now. I think when we got off, I think it was one of our first experiences when we were in Bucharest at the main station there. There was a man, normal dress man, like normal dress there was probably fairly old fashioned. You know what I mean? There weren't Levi's and stuff. So fairly old fashioned dress. He was being dragged by the arm. It was literally like something out of a movie, by two men literally in suits, in black suits, screaming, and it was obviously the secret police had grabbed this guy. Like, there's no doubt that's what had happened. Two men in suits don't grab you and drag you by either arm.
No.
And this was the end of Ceausescu's reign. Like, this is when he's hammering down steel.
He was getting really desperate.
Yeah. And I'll never forget that. When people talk about how wonderful socialism or communism is, I think of those experiences. I'm glad I got to see what it is when it's fully fledged, because you wouldn't want to live it.
Yeah. Because everyone I know who fled Eastern Europe, and I had relatives who lived in Eastern Germany, which is probably not as bad as Romania. And they were like, I don't know why you'd want communism. I don't care how well any of these people think they can do it better or they have better ideas. I don't know why you would want it. It is just so devastating.
Yeah, I had great friends from the Czech Republic in Sydney, a number of them. And they were about my age, maybe a little younger. And they could never understand anybody in the West liking socialist ideas, because they lived through it when they were kids, and it was horrible. Like, they had no good I mean, they obviously probably had good memories of playing with their friends, but the memories of their cultural day-to-day reality was hideous. And they hadn't become right-wing politically. They'd become right-wing just culturally, because they'd suffered under the extremes of communism, and they never wanted to suffer under that again. They were some of the most conservative right-wing people I'd ever met. And I don't think they were raised to be. I think they'd been raised in a counter way, but it was so horrible they just never wanted to go towards
and they swung back the other way.
Yeah.
So now, when you were in Romania, did you ever tell or were able to communicate to any of the locals what your criteria was, that like you wanted to see Castle Dracula, or ask them about vampire myth?
Yeah. And it was very difficult, because so we were in Bucharest. I think we were there for longer than we planned to, because my friend got sick and we couldn't travel. And then we wanted, again, I had the In Search of Dracula book, which I had one which I think had like this picture of Christopher Lee, like a weird kind of, old portrait of him in maybe in a negative style or something on a hardback book, which I carried with me as my travel guide, I guess. And so we're originally in Bucharest, and then we know we have to, following the route that he has, we know we have to go to so we're at the south, we're at the very south of the country. We have to go north. We have to first go to the biggest, smallish, I guess, biggest city near there, which was hardly even a city, called the Courtesay. So we got public transport to Courtesay, and I remember being on, I even think we might have had to have got a couple of things. Maybe we were on a train, and then maybe we were on a bus. And I remember there being, again, this is like something out of a movie, there were people in traditional costumes still, even though the communists had destroyed a lot of the traditional culture there. There were still people in traditional costume, which to me looked like something you would think of a gypsy wearing, or that was probably just a national costume of one of the various, national groups there. And people in like normal public transport with like ducks under their arms and like chickens in little cages and things. Like, this is just being transported in public transport with people with their livestock traveling. It was super weird to me as a city boy then. It'd probably be less weird to me now as somebody who has chickens, has lived in a rural area for so long. But it was
like,
super weird.
You're my home. I'm home. There's
exactly. It's like, what on earth? And then so I think we got to Courtesay, which I think is, I'm probably mispronouncing it, but the Arges is the river that flows in that part of the southern part of the country. And Castle Dracula is kind of on a mountain precipice above the river on one of the banks. Anyway, from the Courtesay, I think it was still something like, I don't know, 20 or 30 miles or something, to maybe 20 miles to, I think the village was called Arafu, which is the closest village, if I recall, to where Castle Dracula is. Like, Castle Dracula is very close there. And I think after we got to Courtesay, I think that might have been the end of the line. I don't know. Maybe we got another bus to near Arafu, but I know towards the end we had to hitchhike. And I remember, again, this is a memory from, over a couple of decades ago. We were in the back of a very old-fashioned, Lord knows it was probably some Soviet truck. I don't even know the manufacturer, but we were in the back of a truck, like we literally in the back of, and it wasn't like an American pickup truck. It was a far more old-fashioned truck. It looked like something almost from the 40s or 50s. We were in the back of that truck traveling for some time. And then I think we got to Arafu. And I think we hitchhiked a little bit more. We had to go up the mountain. And to answer your question about trying to communicate with the locals, out there, nobody spoke. Nobody spoke English at all that I could find. So we were asking people who were sitting like on outside of their houses or on the street. We were saying we want to go to Castle Dracula, and we were going like Tsepish, Tsepish. We were saying like Vlad Tsepish, and people go, oh, da 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 da, and they'd be pointing further up the kind of the mountain path that went up.
Were they even aware that this novel was so big in movies and all that stuff? Were they even aware of its cultural impact outside of Romania?
That's a great question, because to be honest, I'm not even sure if they understood what my questions were, but I think they did. I think they understood that. To answer your question, I couldn't have a good enough of a conversation. We'll get to a point where I have slightly more of a conversation with other people after, but it was less about Dracula anyway. I mean, in this part of the world. But I remember us traveling and just walking, because we had our backpacks on. We were backpacking around, right? So we were backpacking for months, so we had fairly big backpacks on our backs. And I remember, like American Werewolf in London, I guess, I remember me and my friend walking through this area, and I remember us finally seeing what I recognized from the McNally and Florescu book. That's it. Like, we could see it up. So the Argies, as we were walking, was to our right, and the mountains were to our left, if I recall, and we could see it. We could finally see it. And we kept walking and walking and walking. And I suspect what happened, I don't know, but I suspect there was somewhere, because there's meant to be stairs you can take up. I think there was somewhere that we missed where there were stairs that you could go up. And because we couldn't communicate properly with anybody and we didn't know, we kept trying to find how to get there. And we kept walking and walking and walking and walking. And this is later in the day now. And because you're in the mountains, and because, again, this was probably by this stage of our trip, like I said, it was late summer, early fallish. So the days were getting shorter. And it got dark fast. Like, it was getting dark fast. And we were like, this isn't like anywhere where there's public transport. This isn't anywhere where there's a hotel. There's nothing. There's not even any houses where we are. We haven't probably seen even a dwelling for, an hour or two, like, we're in the middle of bloody nowhere. And so we got to try to get back to that town somehow, no cars are coming along this road anymore. Nothing's coming.
Right, because once the sun sets, people are like, they're at home.
Yeah,
We're not
probably
traveling.
particularly here, because you probably get shot if you're out at this time of the night in this part of the world, because what are you doing out late at night when you should be getting ready to work for the state in the morning or something? So we're like, and we're literally in the shadows of Castle Dracula. Like, we're literally, and we can talk a little bit about the castle as well, because some of your listeners might like to hear about some of the origins and some of the story of this. It ties in with some history of Vlad Tepes more probably. But so we were like, we could never, it just seemed like, when you can never get to the top of a mountain, there's always another peak and another peak.
Yeah, I was actually hiking up in the mountains around here the day, and I kept up and up and up. I'm like, oh my God. After an hour and a half.
Like that. It's like, somewhere we've got to be able to get up there, but the paths just seem to keep, or the mountain road or whatever it was, just seemed to keep going around, and it's there anyway. So we went, this is going to be bad. Like, the night was getting cooler, and we're like, we've got And so we're like, we probably should try to go back. It was already dark by now, like literally dark, like and properly dark, like just
Right,
really dark.
pitch.
So we're like, okay, and you're obviously conscious that Castle Dracula is right there. You know, you're 18.
And you didn't have a flashlight or anything?
That's
Torch?
that's a really good question. I mean, it's funny. Again, memory is a funny thing. I can't remember. Nowadays, I would because I'm not an idiot. And also, nowadays, everybody has a cell phone. There was no such thing then, of course.
Right,
So
right.
I don't. To be honest, I don't think we did have a flashlight,
Well,
which
there's a
sounds
lot like,
really.
there's a legend about that castle that, like, people like, they literally worked people to death building that.
That's the story I was going to tell. That's the truth. That's what happened, and we can tell that story quickly. Apparently, Vlad Tepes had been and Vlad Dracula, son of the dragon or son of the devil, depending how you want to interpret the Romanian word. But anyway, Dracula had a couple of things had happened. One, he suspected that his brother had been murdered by perhaps the boyars, which were essentially, I guess, the nobility or the merchant class or some of those higher up people in the Romanian culture of his time, and he'd had his brother's body. Dug up essentially, and in the coffin his brother was upside down, like facing, like not the way you would put somebody in a coffin, facing the ground. He looked like he was all contorted, like he'd been buried alive, and that was supposedly the rumor. And at the time he also realized he wanted to move his, I guess, his capital of his princedom or whatever it was from Turgovista, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, to somewhere that was more defendable. And he'd seen what became Castle Dracula. Apparently, there was meant to be some confusion, according to McNally and Florescu, that on either side of the Argies there were actually supposedly two castles, and they'd both kind of come into disrepair. And Vlad Tepes had realized the one which finally he rebuilt was in the better, I suppose, tactical position. So he'd wanted to rebuild it. And at the same time, he discovered the potential murder or burying alive of his brother. And so his mind, I suppose, as supposedly sadistic and cunning, as clever as he was, he realized he could kill two birds with the one stone. So this was around Easter time, and he realized, what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a party for my boyar class and the merchants and everybody, a big Easter party. And, I'll get them all drunk and they'll have a lovely day. So everybody came in their finery, all of these, the upper echelon of, I suppose, the people he ruled over. And, they had a lovely day, and the kids played on swings and carnival-esque stuff, and everybody drank. And at night he positioned all of his soldiers, and everybody's drunk by this time. And he just gives the order, and they all move in and arrest the entire class of this entire class.
Ability.
Yeah,
Yeah.
essentially the entire nobility of the people and all of the older boyars, or however you pronounce it, the older nobility, and the richer, fatter merchant class. He just literally did what he was known to do. He impaled them on the spot. Like, he impaled hundreds of them, I think. Just impaled them. And the younger ones, he put in essentially an internment camp. He built this, like, there was a paddock or a pasture with like a fence around it. And when he was ready and he had them all ready to go, he did the march to where the kind of Arafu area is now, from Turgovista, or however you pronounce it, which I think it's like, 60 miles away or something. He marched these people in their Easter finery all the way there on foot, this essentially the upper echelons of his society, and had them build his castle. And they took, I think, the rocks from the castle on the other side of the river, transported them over to the new one. And they apparently worked according to the chronicles of the day until their clothes, because they didn't have any other clothes, literally were falling off their bodies and they were naked. So I'm sure many of them died, but he got what he wanted. He got to humiliate the entire upper echelon of the people who he thought betrayed him, and he got his castle built. And that was the castle that had fallen back into rubble or disrepair by the time that I got there. That's the castle.
Now, did you come across vampire legends or lore or any kind of mythology amongst people? Like, did you hear any superstitious chatterings or anything like that amongst the people, or you just couldn't communicate?
That was the problem, you know. I wish I had I mean, I have other stories later that night because we ended up staying with some people in the middle of nowhere, which was super weird. But those people couldn't speak hardly any better English than anybody else I'd spoken to either. So the ability to have a conversation and say what I'm doing, what I'm interested in, otherwise than where's Tepesh, you know, that was literally all we could do. Dracula, you know,
Too
like
bad you didn't have a photocopy photo like this guy,
that's what
Castle. We're
that's
looking
what
for him.
That's right. And of
Mhm.
course, you know, because you do this show and I know how well versed you are in vampire lore, it's actually quite different. You know what I mean? Like Vlad had been held as in some ways a national hero because for fighting the Turks. People knew about his cruelty. Supposedly people were still scared of his castle because of the bad mojo of it. But I don't know if Dracula at that stage in Romania, probably now, because they didn't have access to Western movies then either, of course. You know what I mean? So it's not like they'd seen all the films we've seen. I think then the idea of the Strigoi or the Moroi or whatever these different witches and
Yes.
undead types are, I don't think then historically they'd match the two the way that Harker had back in the way not Harker, the way that
Stoker.
Bram Stoker had back in the day when he
No.
put the story together.
And really, Bram Stoker was just grabbing the name. You know, he was basing the actual character off of a whole bunch of different people. He just saw the name and thought it would look good. And I'm sure he was aware of him. He did lots of research in that area and tourist research, but he didn't, he wasn't equating Vlad to pass as a vampire. And there's no way their culture would have even figured that out. And once they did, good for them for marketing it.
Well, now it is. Now you could go there and get the T-shirt. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the hilarious thing. I almost want to go back there one day just so I can do the full tourist thing and walk up probably the better craft
There's
and everything.
there's a channel called Amy's Crypt, and she travels to Romania and films paranormal stuff and stuff. Like she goes through a whole bunch of towns and some of the castles, and her husband hike up, and it's really well done production. Yeah, she does some. It's a few years old, but she goes into Romania, so it was really interesting. She goes into that Bacau forest, the haunted forest, and everything.
Nice.
So yeah, people are doing that. People are going, but it's a heck of a lot easier now than I'm sure it was in '89.
It was like I said when we were coming back that night, and we didn't know what we were going to do. Again, we're like two 18-year-old guys. You know what I mean? Our first time internationally together, and when we were walking back down that mountain pass. Now we're going the other way. So now the castle is probably behind us and to the right. And it's super creepy. And we're very conscious. We're joking about how creepy it is. Like we're here stuck in the middle of nowhere and Dracula's castle is literally, above us. We saw a fire, like a campfire off to the side of the river. And we went, we've got nothing to look. We've got nowhere to go. There's not another light in sight, mind you. I think it was even maybe overcast. There was nothing, you know what I mean? We couldn't see a thing. And we walked over and there were these 4 guys who were Romanian and they couldn't speak hardly a lick of English either. And they invited us over though to sit at their campfire. I think they gave us maybe some of the food they had. And I remember them passing around a bottle that they were all drinking out of. Lord knows it was alcoholic is all I know, because obviously A, we'd had a long day, so we wanted to have some, and B, you weren't going to be inhospitable and not drink from the bottle, when it was passed around.
Right,
I remember
right.
it being this really I don't even know what kind of liquor it was. It was probably
That's when you want some Sandy wipes.
there was no Sandy wipes that night, Melissa. And so we drank.
Yeah, they were. You could have we had little paper toilets for
probably,
hand towels here,
we
but not there.
Yeah, not in Rome. They wouldn't even know what sanitization was. Anyway, so we drank with them for a while, and then we went home with one of the guys, and he said, "You come with me." And I'd love to say it was like an old villagey, house, like something at the beginning of the original Universal Dracula movie, but it wasn't like that. It was like a government built kind of, twinplex or something.
Right.
And he took us in, and I think we even maybe even gave us his bed. Like he was super hospitable. And in his sink that he had, where I think we went to, I don't know, clean our teeth or do whatever, he had this fish a biggish fish, like maybe, I don't know, like maybe 8 inches long or something, maybe a bit 6 to 8 inches long. Anyway, in a plastic bag, a totally transparent plastic bag tied up. And I remember going, "Oh, is that your pets? You know, like, is it your pets?" And him going, "Yum, yum, 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 yum," like he was just keeping it there in this plastic bag because I guess there's no refrigeration.
That's
So
dinner.
yeah, exactly. And he didn't share it with us. He was obviously saving it for a more special occasion or something. And then in the morning, I think he guided us back, and we walked back, and we finally, probably we hitchhiked a little more, and then maybe he even gave us a lift. Maybe he had a truck or something. And then we got back to Arafu, and we got back to the Courtesay, and we made our way back to Bucharest before we got out of there. But that was another story about the castle that might be interesting. Of course, I think I haven't seen Coppola's Dracula for many years, but as I recall, the Winona Ryder character jumps off a parapet when the Turks are coming.
Right, into
Right?
the river. Yeah.
That is literally that castle I was at. It's far more
Yes.
romantic in that version. I think Vlad doesn't get back in time to save her or something. The
No.
actual version is supposed.
She thinks he's dead. That's why she jumps off.
Okay.
She thinks he's been killed in battle. They shot an arrow saying he's dead. So she jumps off the castle into that Argus River.
Yeah. That, which is close to
And
what
game
happened,
over.
although that's much more romantic. What actually happened, supposedly, is that the Turks had come very close. I think they were on the other side of the river. They were where the other castle used to be, or the other fortress on the other side was, if I recall. And one of the kind of the slaves they'd captured, or one of the people they had more loyalty to Vlad, I suppose. And somehow he escaped, and supposedly he shot an arrow up which went through a window, and it had a note attached to it which said, the Turks are here, they're planning on attacking in the morning or something. I mean, they obviously already knew the Turks were there, but he told them they're going to be attacking or something. The castle had already withstood a number of, I think, serious attacks, but it was fair. Vlad Tepsin made sure it had been built really solidly when he'd rebuilt it. And his wife, in a panic, decided she was going to suicide. And arguably, it's very difficult to tell whether Vlad knew she was going to do it or not, but he certainly knew how bad it would have been for her if she'd fallen into the hands of the Turks. And she jumped out the window and committed suicide, whether before he could stop her or whether he just let her do it. Nobody obviously is going to know.
I'm thinking when you understand what happened to captured people in those days, you would understand why someone would do that, because it wasn't very nice. I will be subtle and say that.
And so whatever reason, that's when the Winona character, the real Winona character, jumped off of the precipice of what was Castle Dracula and went into the Arges, or she probably crushed her bones really before she hit the Arges. But then Dracula escaped from that. Apparently he had a kind of escape route, and he got the people who remained in the castle to do a lot of cannon fire or whatever the equivalent was to distract them, and he got away. He actually escaped then. The Turks attacked, I think, and maybe they eventually took the castle, but that was not the end of Vlad. He escaped there. And apparently, though, when he was riding away, his son, I think was his illegitimate son, this is another story, fell off his horse, and they didn't have time to go back and get the kid. But supposedly, and this is again one of these many legends that circulate around all these kind of historical figures, the kid was raised by a local shepherd or a local sheep herder or something, and years later he presented himself to Vlad again as a fully grown, young man, and Vlad supposedly gave the shepherd who'd raised him, or the farmer who'd raised him, large tracts of land or something. So the castle is a very pivotal point of the story of I guess suppose both of the historical Dracula as well as the literary and filmic character that we have.
So when you were up at the castle, though, I know you said it got dark, but did it have that sort of mysterious gothic feel like you see in the movies? Was there any wolves howling? Like, were you like, oh my God, we're surrounded by wilderness and wildlife, and I think Dracula could just come out right now?
We were scared. I think we were scared both because of the significance of where we were, but also because We were in a deserted part of the world. It was nighttime. We didn't speak the language, but yeah, we were certainly conscious. I remember us jokingly trying to keep our high spirits up, talking about, that's Castle Dracula right there, and we're in the middle of nowhere. It was scary. It was a part of the world where it got dark super fast. Like the darkness overtook us far faster than I thought it would. And then we realized we were in trouble because we got to a stage where even if there is somewhere to get up to that castle, we're not going. I think if we'd got there, we would have just stayed there, but we just couldn't get there. And it got so dark. We're on this road with the Argus flowing, to our right, and the castle above us somewhere, to our left. And yeah, we were worried when we saw that fire. And then again, at first I think we'd like to think these people were gypsies or something, but then we realized, it was just probably people who were just working Romanians in, the middle of the wilderness. But it's even that had a really weird vibe, like these people who can't speak English passing this, Lord knows what it was, homebrewed alcohol. The whole night. It was definitely a creepy night. It was super creepy. One of the creepiest nights of my life, for sure. I make light of it now, but I wasn't making light of it at the time.
No, and you're saying like it's summer to fall, so it's getting chill.
Yeah, it was cool. We were wearing jackets. It wasn't like t-shirt weather anymore.
We have the question is, where'd you sleep that night when you're in the mountain? Did you make it down and with those people in the apartment, or
Yeah,
is
the guy, it
that's
was
what
like
you were saying?
yeah, he got us to his twinplex. So after we sat around the fire for some time, we drank, and we were probably half cut by the time we were probably on the way to being drunk by the time we left there. And then he got us back. And Lord, I mean, what he could have done to us, do you know what I mean? Again, we're so lucky that it was a decent human being who didn't think I'm going to, kill these boys and take their American dollars. You know what I mean? But yeah, he didn't.
Yeah, they could. I mean, they very well could have. It's. I mean,
Nobody
it's
would
true.
ever have found us. Can you imagine if we'd gone missing in Romania back in 1989?
Well, that's
When
what I'm
Ceausescu
thinking.
nobody would ever. We would have been a blip in. We would have been forgotten entirely. Never would have been.
Well, yeah, they would have never found you.
The whole country was about to fall apart. So
That just thinking about that is a little bit crazy. I mean,
yeah,
there's people in America who go missing in the middle of the woods and are never found for a long time, and you're in the middle of Romania that's about to collapse from a communist government.
yeah. I was
Whoa, to be young and not understand the big picture.
exactly the foolishness of youth.
Well, I mean, you're here. I'm glad you made it out. You're telling us the experience.
I'm
So,
glad
I
to.
mean, some something good happened there.
Yeah,
So, there's obviously a huge gap between our Western fantasies or fictionalization and romanticization of the vampire and the reality and harshness of living in Romania.
Oh yeah, there's a massive difference, and I think there are traditions that we don't often even know that Romania had about the things which we think about as vampires, like strigoi, those who have returned from the dead. Like the patron saint in Romania is St. Andrew, for example, and St. Andrew, among many other things, is meant to be the patron saint of wolves and the patron saint of vampires, both of which sound quite crazy. On St. Andrew's Eve, which is almost a month after Halloween, I think it's November 30th. I think that was the equivalent. Would have loved to have been in Romania for that, imagine. That was the equivalent of our Halloween, I think, St. Andrew's Eve. And supposedly on that night, it's the night of the year when vampires, along with all the other spectral and weird world, are able to come together, and they make their plans for the following year on who they're going to kill and what they're going to do, and they're able to run riot at that time of the year. And in fact, some of the traditions say from that point on through the winter is when vampires can be more active, which probably fits in some ways with our Halloween here in the West. It's getting darker, it's more dangerous. The veil
Very similar, very big similarities, of course. Yeah, huge similarities between I mean, the Druids in England were invaded by the Celts, so they obviously some of those things are colliding and combining because they would have had Celts from Viking, maybe from France, I don't know.
Well, yeah, Romania is the same. Romania has all kinds of racial groups. There's Germanic groups,
Mhm.
there's, um there's other local native racial groups, which we're probably not even familiar with, which I probably can't even pronounce. There's Hungarian racial groups in there. It's quite, and I think St. Andrew originally, I think he was maybe a Germanic saint. I think he was meant to protect the Germans or something as well,
Okay.
for whatever reason, he became the patron saint
It's
pretty much of
it's
Romania.
so it's still so pagan because you know all those saints are actually adapted from pagan gods into saints
It's
when the
scary.
church took over. It is weird. Now, did you go to Bron Castle, the other
No.
one? You weren't able to?
I kinda made the decision to go to the real one, but, you're young and you're conceited and you wanna be hip and punk, so you're like, "I'm not gonna go to the
S
popular one, which is easy to
I
get
think
to in a
it's
pretty castle. I'm gonna go to the weird one up
yeah.
in the middle of nowhere," you know?
Is it Shigishwara in the city or something? There is a place where apparently Vlad was born that you can go and see now. Did you
I think if you wanted to do a Dracula tour of Romania now, it would be just, it would be easy, but it would also be amazing because you get access to all these places, and it wouldn't be this weird slog, you know? It'd be very different.
yeah. Now, did you go and visit any other areas that were associated with Vlad? Because I know they have a place where they say he's buried, that there's no body in
Yeah,
and
there is
stuff
no
like
body
that.
there, you're right. No, I did not go there, but I was aware of the book because they talk about that in the book, that there's a missing body as well, supposedly, so but no, I didn't go there. To be honest, I very much cherry-picked my fanboy things. Like, I was before I went to Europe, I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna go to these Bond bars. I'm gonna go to 221B. I'm gonna go to, Reichenbach. I'm gonna go to Dracula's castle." Like, I knew where I wanted to go, and the Dracula if I did it today, I would probably make a point of doing a Romanian trip and hitting, half a dozen of
All the
these kind of
points.
places. But back
That
then,
was
I just
the
wanted to get to the real
that
Dracula's
was
castle. That was my
that was
plan.
gonna be my next question before we wrap well, a couple questions, but, like, what would you do today if you got to go there? Um, like, yeah, you would obviously track the whole thing, and you would probably have better food.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't get food poisoning from eating at one of the best restaurants in Rome in Bucharest, I
Hmm,
assume. I think there'd be good
yeah,
restaurants now where you could probably eat quite safely. I'm sure it's far more westernized now. I know a
right.
filmmaker from there. Speaking of films from there, many years later when I was running a night of horror in Sydney, Australia, I played, I think, which was what was one of the very first, maybe the first horror movie made in Romania. It was called Strigoi, and it was a vampire movie, but within the Romanian tradition of what the Strigoi is, and it was fascinating to
Mhm,
see the representation of the undead in that as opposed to the Bela Lugosi or Christopher Lee,
mhm,
the nobleman who's very suave and very hypnotizing and very debonair, to this kind of shambling, mess coming out of the grave and being stinky and nasty and, just very much a normal lower class, middle class kind of person in that movie. And that movie also captured, I think it had some of the traditions, like sprinkling seeds or something near the grave at night. So when the vampire got up, it had to, or the strigoi came out, it had to, because it was, I guess they're like ADHD. It has to count the seeds. So the more seeds
yep,
you
count the
sprinkle, it doesn't have time to
seeds,
get to you and mess you up.
untie knots,
Right.
yeah, all sorts of things. Yeah, it's interesting, the beliefs. Now, did going to Romania and having that experience, did that, like, reinforce your understanding as Dracula's novel? Like, how did it make you relate to the book and that sort of vampire genre after that experience? Did it change how you saw it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it made me a little bit sad that so much of the local culture had been, I mean, you could still see elements of it, of course, but
Right.
so much had been destroyed by communism. Like, a part of me wanted to have been able to have gone back in the 19th century where there weren't weird, quickly built, twin plexes that who I thought originally was a gypsy or a peasant was living in. I wanted to go to there where the main danger was the aristocratic aristocratic rather, vampire who lived still in the castle. When I went there, the main danger, of course, was the state, and it was the terrors you saw were that there wasn't any good food in the market. It had all been sent east, and people being torn away by secret police and screaming, and people trying to do deals with you for American dollars, and people who were clearly government employees trying to pimp up how wonderful the country was. Like the terrors now, there was nothing romantic about there were real terrors when I was there. There was real reasons to be afraid, particularly
It
if you
wasn't
lived
Dracula.
I'd rather I'd rather the weird aristocratic vampire count than the state tearing me through a can you imagine being in like New York, I don't know, New York subway, or a major subway in Sydney, or a major station in like anywhere in America, and seeing somebody being dragged by two men in black suits screaming for his life in abject terror.
Yeah.
And that guy was probably shot in the head or sent to, he probably didn't live. You know what I mean? Like that to me is that's more horrifying than Dracula, but there's no romance in it. There's nothing cool and okay, I can get Van Helsing to help me and we'll go
tyranny,
and we'll deal with this monster.
terror.
The monster is the state, and the state is inescapable. At least Dracula you can fight. So that was probably I think that instilled, to be honest with you, what that trip instilled more than a reinterpretation of the book, and made me want the book times more. But it really instilled in me just how wicked and dangerous socialism and communism is, seeing it to its full extent, to the full reality of the poverty and the misery and the tyranny. It made me have a very clear sense of the dangers.
You would be better living under a medieval king.
Absolutely.
Than this massive machine of communism.
Absolutely. Any day.
So do you think the people of Romania then or now, do you think they're proud of the fact that people know their country for Dracula, and that there was this book written about a leader, not about, but they use their leader as a metaphor in name and whatnot, of this literary and movie figure that is massive and has survived over a century?
Because I haven't been there since the country's open more, I can only surmise, but I imagine that it's kind of a kick to have had this, this massive cultural phenomenon originate with a tyrannical figure of your past and be very location specific. I'm sure the people who live in the areas where they make, a buck out of the tourism, I'm sure they're like, yes, Dracula. But as far as your average Romanian, that's a good question. I don't know, maybe. But then again, it might also be like, we don't want to be remembered for Dracula. Is that what we're remembered for? Is that what the whole West thinks of us?
I know that they are generally proud of him as a leader and not necessarily as an evil villain. Right. I do know that.
And he stopped he fought the Turks, so I agree with them. I mean, good Lord. He might have been vicious and a madman, but that's better than the Turks taking over the country.
He was defending Christendom.
Exactly.
Right? I don't know what Christendom has become now, but mega churches and fucking crazy land. But back in those days, he was fighting for what he thought was true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. So
sometimes you need a madman to do that. You need somebody who's crazy to fight crazy.
It's a scary concept, and it's still relevant today. Unfortunately. Now, if you could speak directly to Bram Stoker and talk to him about your travels, what would you want to tell him that he got right or wrong about Romania? Because he had never been there, but he studied it in the library. What would you can think about this for a bit, but what would you tell him? What would you say? Hey, here's what I want you to know about Romania.
Well, I think what he got essentially wrong was the geographical location of where Dracula's castle was. I mean, other than that, I'm not sure how I can fairly fault him, because I was there so much later on. But I know geographically he got the castle placement wrong. So I'd probably just tell him, you're in the wrong spot for the castle. No, fix that, and you fix that, and you're all good.
You're good. You've got it going down. And do you still are vampire films something you still like to do, or was that just when you were younger?
No, I mean, I still, obviously I run a Night of Horror International Film Festival and have for almost 20 years now, and Midwest Weird Fest for the last 10. So I'm still somebody who consumes an awful lot of horror. I started to introduce because I'm very careful with what my daughter watches because so much modern content is just trash. But I thought, I think
Mhm.
she's big enough to watch the Universal monster movies this Halloween season. So
Yeah,
I knew I was doing this, so I
they're a
thought I'll
little
start.
tamer.
Yeah, yeah, I wouldn't wanna let her watch the kind of stuff I watched when I was a little older than her, which was way too extreme. Like, I was probably watching a year or 2 after her, I was probably watching Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Evil Dead. Like, I would never put those things on anywhere near. But I thought those
Gen
Universal
X is
movies.
special.
Exactly. Exactly, we are. But I started to watch Dracula with her the other night, and she wasn't scared. It's funny, sometimes I just don't think she's ready or interested. Like, she was watching it with me, but she was, like, also coloring and doing other stuff, and it wasn't that she was scared, she just wasn't like, whatever. It wasn't something that was
It's hard
grabbing
to
me.
believe that people were scared of that movie even in 1931. It was hard it's hard for me. It's spooky, it's creepy.
It is
I can get
creepy.
them being a little eroticized in those days, but I can't I still don't I'm like, "They were scared? Really?"
I love the
Mhm.
atmosphere of that movie, though. I love the
Yeah.
beginning when they're going through the Bordeaux Pass or wherever it's meant to be, and, when
Mhm.
Renfield gets out and they're all like, "You can't go on, come in, it's Walpurgis
Mhm.
night," and he's like, "No, I've got a carriage waiting for me to take me to Castle Dracula," and they're like, "No, no."
Oh,
I mean, it's so
and he
there's
was
something
such a
very.
great actor, the guy who played Renfield.
Yeah, it's great.
'Cause, yeah, they do it differently. They show he goes there, he's Renfield, and he comes back. There's no Jonathan Harker
No,
that goes to the castle.
right.
Jonathan Harker is still back in England, so they switch it up a bit.
Yeah. It works, though, I mean, I do enjoy that movie. Dracula is probably, I mean, Bride of Frankenstein's amazing as well, but to be honest, Dracula is probably although it's hard to say because I also love Creature from the Black Lagoon, but Dracula is probably my favorite of the Universal monster movies, and it's
Mhm.
because it's so early, and I think it's did they do Dracula then Frankenstein, I think, right? Or is it the other way
Yeah,
around?
they did Dracula, then
Dracula first, then
Frankenstein because
Frankenstein.
Bela Lugosi was actually offered to do Frankenstein, and he turned it down because he didn't want the makeup on, and they found Boris Karloff, and he regretted turning it down.
I'm glad I
But,
think Karloff's a better Dracula, a better Frankenstein, so
yeah,
I'm
I
glad
think they
they
made a
did.
good decision.
But there's something very atmospheric and, about that film, it's very hypnotic, so I really love it, like, Dracula to me is probably the most hypnotic of those movies, there's something very,
Well,
I don't
and
know.
to think, Bela Lugosi was a Hungarian actor, so he would have grown up in that area,
Yeah,
not necessarily Romania, but during the time and would have
not far
experienced
away.
a Europe that was more similar to Stoker's rendition.
Yeah, he would have known what the late 19th century Europe would have been. I don't know well, maybe just as a kid, I'm not
Ken
sure how old he was when he made Dracula.
Ken makes a good point. He says, "I understand why they were so spooked in 1930. They weren't desensitized then." Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, that is a good point, Ken. Great to see you here too, mate.
That's totally true. I always forget that they weren't as desensitized and they weren't used to mass media, mass film, TVs in your house. Yeah,
And the use of weird
simpler times.
animals, and the animals coming out of the coffins like little spidery bee things coming out and possums, and, all
Mhm.
these.
Yeah, a little yeah,
It's
that's
just weird, like, it's just a weird scene when we first are introduced to Bela Lugosi, like, it's just weird.
yeah, today it's like people are freakier. So now Dracula has to be even weirder. Like, oh, what an armadillo or a possum
That's
crawling
right.
out? Big deal. This guy down the road's got 10 pythons and 20 armadillos for a pet now. You know what I mean?
That's right, there's armadillos in that as well, I forgot that. It's so funny, the animals they put in, but it's still maybe it's even creepier 'cause it must have just been, "What's the weirdest animals we can think of?" "Well, those possums look goddamn weird, and armadillos are a weird looking critter." Of course, none of them are actually in Romania, but it's like, "They're super
No,
weird,
it's
let's get some of them
it's
in there."
it's the Romanian armadillo. That's funny.
Oh,
Yeah,
too
no, it's
funny.
funny. That's the glory of fiction. Well, I don't know if you wanna add if there's anything else you'd like to add, I wanna tie it up for you because I know you're busy tonight, but is there any other little tale or anything you'd like to add that you felt was intrinsic to your journey?
No, I think I probably covered it all. I do think if people get the chance to go and visit the locations from the pop culture that they love, it's really worth it. Like, it's memories you'll have forever. It somehow brings it out of the film or out of the book, you get to actually
Mhm.
be there and have a sense of what those spaces are like in reality. And I don't think it ever lessens the literature or lessens the films. I think it only gives you a closer personal connection with the things that you are really into. So I think if there's something you really like and you have the opportunity to go to the location ever, particularly if it's quasi historical, like again, James Bond novels have the bars he drank in, Sherlock Holmes novels have dresses and places, and where Holmes died. Dracula novels have are based on kind of historical figures. So if there's that kind of reality you can key your interest into, and if the
Mhm.
opportunity ever arises to visit, like, totally do it. Like, those memories will be with me
Yeah.
forever.
And also, I mean, there's the fictional, but you can also learn about the real history and the real culture in combination and get a fuller experience.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Dean, I'm going to pop you out. You don't have to hang around, but I thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you, by the way, in your Midwest Weird Fest and your horror festival and your podcast? Where can they go to look you up?
Sure, there's a few things I'd point people at. Firstly, if they wanna come to an incredible horror festival or an incredible weird offbeat festival, they run at the same time in the same cinema on 2 different screens, and that is the next one, the 10th annual Midwest Weird Fest, and I think the 18th, A Night of Horror run in Eau Claire, Wisconsin from March 5 to March 8, 2026, and they can go to either of those websites, which is A Night of Horror, that's anightofhorror.com, or midwestweirdfest.com. You can catch me on the Untold Radio Network every Thursday night, usually live. I occasionally have to do a pre-record, but that's pretty rare. And it also goes out on all podcast platforms after that, but you can watch it live on X or on YouTube or on Facebook, and that's Talking Weird. You can also go to the Untold Radio or just untoldradioam.com to find all the previous broadcasts of that. And if you want to check out the feature film I've been making for a long time, and the short film from that feature, which is on the festival circuit at the moment, and I'd urge people, it'd be big, it'd be great for me if you would do it, is let's go to The Shaver Mystery, shaver the way you'd spell electric shaver, theshavermystery.com, and that'll redirect you to the Facebook site, The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers, which is the name of the feature documentary. The Shaver Mystery is the name of the short. It's a fascinating period of the development of early UFO belief and of how a writer in the pulps and an editor in the pulps, essentially the science fiction pulps, essentially laid the groundwork for everything that we believe about UFOs today, and that's what the films are about. So again, go to theshavermystery.com and like that page to see what I'm up to with those films.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming by, Dean. Of course, you're always welcome again. I'm going to pop you out, and that was great. That was
Thank
really
you.
insightful. I know you were like hesitant that you had anything to add about it, but I think that was very insightful about that time of history in Romania.
Well, thanks for letting me rant about it. I haven't talked about it for years, so that was fun.
There you go. All right. Thank you. And you don't have to hang around, but I'm just going to tie her up here and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you, Melissa. It was a great.
All right, guys. You heard it there. That was fascinating. I mean, that was really. I am half Eastern European and I've never gotten to go. I don't know if I ever will get to go. We'll see. We'll see what happens, of course, with all the political stuff that's going on in this world. But thank you so much, Dean. Super fascinating experience. If you guys do, remember, check out that channel, Amy's Crypt, because she's got some modern stuff and some good shots, some good stuff. And it's worth checking her channel out because she goes all over the world with the paranormal. But remember, you can join the Loyalty Rewards Club over at Substack, melissadawnharris.substack.com. You can join for free. There's all sorts of ways to support for free, like sharing thumbs up on this podcast, leaving comments afterwards in the comment section on the video, sharing it on your social media, adding it to a playlist, subscribing for free over at Substack and leaving comments and reposting stuff there. There's all that free way. But if you do want to support me over at Substack, you can join. I believe it's about $8 a month, and weekly free podcasts, all the articles that free does not get, and of course a whole archive of audio, visual. I have tons of magazines that I've created over the years that are in the archive for paid subscribers only. So I appreciate you guys for coming around. That's melissadonharris.substack.com, and melissadonharris.com, of course, is the website. We will be back here on Thursday. I was supposed to have Gary on this week, but he's probably going to come in November, December. He's feeling quite under the weather and not well. I think we are doing the show on witches and politics. We'll get into that. That's Thursday. We are going to be 7 p.m. Eastern this Thursday. I'm going to do it a little earlier, so please join along. And then, of course, Jerry and Nish aren't coming next Tuesday. They're coming on the 28th. We had to shuffle them around, so we'll have a show then, and we'll probably do a Q&A on the 23rd. And don't forget, the 30th of October, Walter Bosley and Todd Woods are coming, and we're having a Dark Shadows episode. We're going all vampire just before Halloween. So be there, guys. I'm going to tie it up, and I thank you guys for all joining. Remember, subscribe, thumbs up, and share that content, and I will see you guys on Thursday.